Jacob looked at Kenith thoughtfully and answered, "Your dad said that I'm brave enough, but my temperament is not domineering enough to become an overlord." "Well said." Kenith drank a mouthful of the strong liquor. "He said that Soph's father has the ambition, but is not assertive enough. You are brave and powerful, but not calculative enough. And Soph's second uncle is smart, but can't cultivate. So he could only enjoy the wealth in the mortal world." Kenith was buried in his thoughts. He also said that Soph is not calm enough to become a leader, and North Atlantic might be in trouble in the future. Therefore, he didn't want the commanding general's position to fall into other people's hands. He would rather pass it on to an incapable man than a vicious schemer. Incapable man? Kenith looked at Jacob and said, "I don't see how you are an incapable man." He knew that Darius had good eyes. Jacob would never get this position if he were really incapable. How could an incompetent person guard the commanding general's token after all? Jacob didn't comment on that. He continued, "He wanted to pass his cultivation strength to you, but you didn't come back. He thought it would be a waste to give it to Soph's father, and it was inappropriate to pass it on to Soph as well. Therefore, he gave it to me." "What else?" Kenith questioned. "He said he had cultivated for more than 1,000 years, but his strong, murderous spirit hindered him from breaking through to the heavenly dragon realm. However, he had been on the throne all his life, so there were no regrets," Jacob said. Kenith nodded and kept silent. Jacob didn't say anything else as well. "Anything he wanted you to tell me?" Kenith couldn't let go and kept asking. "He just asked me to pass the sword to you. Nothing else," Jacob answered. Kenith gritted his teeth as he snorted through his nose. Then he took a few more sips. He looked at Darius's palace. Kenith had too many memories associated with the large practice field in front of the palace. Darius taught him how to stand on the ground when he first learned how to walk, and he taught him fist techniques and the spirit concentration scroll. At that time, Kenith was a little kid, but he practiced extra hard. Kenith sensed that his nose got a little runny, and his eyes watered. "Are you okay, Elder?" Jacob noticed the change on Kenith's face. I'm okay. I'm just drunk. And you don't need to be so formal from now on. Call me Uncle, like Soph does." Kenith raised his bottle and toasted Jacob. Jacob was surprised, but just nodded at him. They both took a sip of their drinks. "Kid?" Kenith put the bottle down and looked at Jacob. "Yes?" Jacob looked at him. "Who is that Kathy?" Kenith asked. "She's my friend," Jacob answered. "It's not that simple, is it?" Kenith asked. "What do you mean?" Jacob posed a question back to him. "I don't want Soph to be in an unfavorable situation. I don't care what kind of agreement Helen made with that girl. I'm not okay with it," Kenith said. He glimpsed at Jacob, who did not respond, and continued, "Sever ties with that Kathy, or I am pushing you down." Kenith put one of his hands on Jacob's shoulder. Jacob looked at him quietly and responded, "I won't." Kenith suddenly pushed, and Jacob's body tilted, as if he was about to roll down from the tower. However, Jacob took the opportunity to grab onto Kenith's arm, and he applied a simple technique and grabbed Kenith's wrist. "Damn kid." Kenith was pulled up by Jacob. He dropped the bottle in the other hand and swung his fist toward Jacob's face. Jacob stood still on the roof. He dodged Kenith's fist and swung his leg at him. "Nice. You dare to fight me now?" Kenith kicked back at him. Some glazed tiles were lifted, and the array formation of the Profound Cultivation Palace shook once. The Profound Cultivation Palace was the most important palace in the North Atlantic Dragon Palace. Thomas, who temporarily lived there, was invited to set up the array formation himself. Even an 8th level cultivator would be immediately killed if they triggered the array formation. The roof was only about 6 square meters large, but it was over 50 meters tall. Both Jacob and Kenith suppressed their nature essence, and they fought only with their physical power and martial arts techniques. Jacob kept defending himself, but Kenith still landed a fist on his face. At the same time, Jacob's fist smashed into Kenneth's chest as well. However, it didn't bother Kenith at all, since he was very sturdy. Another strike landed on Jacob's right cheek. He might have been equally as powerful as Kenith if he used the sword Shadow Scroll, but if it was only physical strength and martial arts techniques, he was nowhere near Kenith's level. Kenith hit Jacob's chest with his elbow, and Jacob slipped. His back crushed a few glazed tiles behind him. Even so, Jacob didn't use his nature essence. It would be like exploding an atomic bomb if he did that so close to the Profound Cultivation Palace's 7th floor. The array formation here was too complicated. "Get up and keep drinking." Kenith kicked Jacob's knee and picked up the bottle. Jacob rubbed his injuries and picked up the bottle as well. He toasted Kenith. "If you ever make Soph sad in the future, I'll teach you a lesson. It'll not be as easy as today." Kenith stared at Jacob. "I would never hurt Soph intentionally," Jacob said sincerely. Then he sighed. He could neither defeat nor escape from this uncle. He reached the 5th level in such a short time, and he was 1 generation older. Surpassing him in the future would be difficult. "You better wish that I can't reach the Heavenly Dragon Realm," Kenith continued. "Why?" Jacob asked immediately. "I know that there is a Soul Formation Realm cultivator behind that Kathy. Once I get to the Heavenly Dragon Realm, I will see who dares to bully Soph," Kenith said fiercely as he raised his head. "I would like to see who dares to bully Kathy." A voice came from above the Dragon Palace. An extremely strong power crushed the Grand Protection Array formation, the North Atlantic Dragon Palace, in a second. A bright beam of green light suddenly dropped from the sky in front of Jacob. Then an old lady who was wearing a simple green robe appeared. She stood firmly on the tiles, and her clothes were tidy and did not flutter at all. "Irene?" Jacob said in awe and surprise. "Who was the person that wanted to get rid of Kathy?" Irene looked at Jacob and Kenith coldly and said, "I said it." Kenith stood up and said. Irene snorted and showed her displeasure. It was just a light sound, but both Kenith and Jacob were in so much pain that their heads felt like they were going to explode. They felt like there was a needle that was poked into the back of their heads. "I don't have many shortcomings, but one of them is being overly protective," Irene said. Kenith was just about to argue with her when a sudden strong gust of power came towards him, and he felt like his mouth was stuffed with nature essence and couldn't control his body. Then he fell backwards. During the whole process, Irene stood still and didn't even move a single finger. Irene stood firmly there and said, "If you don't treat Kathy well, you will pay for it." Jacob couldn't say anything. One was a dragon cultivator who had a high chance of charging into the Heavenly Dragon Realm, and the other was a Soul Formation Realm cultivator. What else could he say? "I put a note in Kathy's shoulders, so no one at the Dragon God Shrine would dare to hurt her. However, I still can't prevent the other people from hurting her." Irene took out an ancient book from her sleeve and said, "Give this book to Kathy. Even though her talent in cultivation is poor, she still got to the Foundation Establishment realm through hard work." Jacob took the book and looked at it. On it, it said, "Spells, Origin Note Scroll," in ancient characters. He put the scroll that had a ton of nature essence into his necklace. After thinking it over, he asked, "Kathy's at the Dragon Palace. Why don't you give it to her yourself?" "That girl is compassionate and emotional," I'm afraid of seeing her cry, so it's better if I don't see her, Irene responded. Jacob nodded. He knew that Kathy had missed Irene, who taught her dearly. Jacob thought that if not anything else, then at least had the potential to be a delivery agent. After all, Darius asked him to deliver the Black Dragon Spike, and Irene asked him to deliver the scroll. Didn't you put on a great show at the Dragon God Shrine? I see that your realm has reached new heights, Irene said. I reached the mid-tier 4th level, Jacob responded honestly. Mid-tier 4th level was impressive amongst the new generations, but it was nothing in front of a soul formation realm cultivator. You think exhausting yourself to transform into a dragon is fun? Irene took out a white elixir pill and threw it towards Jacob. It might look as if your realm improved, but your meridian is wounded in reality. I know the youngsters like to climb up the ladder quickly, but you also have to be careful. This is a marrow transformation pill. It can heal your meridians. At Kathy's current realm, she wouldn't be able to make it. Cultivation needs to be steady. I don't want to see Kathy cry after you're dead. Irene stared at Jacob and said. Kathy was a priority for Irene, and Jacob seemed to be a priority for Kathy. The last time when she met them, Kathy was in love with Jacob, and thus Irene was ready to force him to marry her. Even if she had to fight the whole North Atlantic fort, she would have done it. But lately she had observed that Kathy had slightly distanced herself from Jacob, and didn't seem to want to be with him anymore, though she still cared a lot about him. So Irene had come here to help Jacob, so that Kathy wouldn't be sad if something happened to him. Jacob hurried and swallowed the pill, as Irene stared at him. She could easily kill him, since she was at a soul formation realm cultivator and wouldn't need to poison him through the pill. This pill was a legendary level 9 golden pill. It was so rare that it was like a myth. It was called a golden pill because it was so rare, not because it was golden in color. Once he swallowed the golden pill, Jacob felt warm inside and filled with energy. This pill was much more potent than the level 4 pill Kathy made. Suddenly, the newer openings that appeared within Jacob's dragon core abruptly closed, and the nature essence in those openings condensed and froze. I had helped you open tens of openings before, and now that they're closed, I'll say I took back what I have given you. The dragon core is your foundation. You rush to elevate your realm, your dragon core will collapse eventually, Irene said. Jacob was a bit shocked. He quickly used his sword shadow scroll, and the pain that his meridian experienced when he used nature essence all disappeared. He thought it was like aftermath of a fierce battle. Little did he know that it was a sign that his foundation was shaking. This little elixir pill helped heal all the unseen injuries that Jacob had accumulated through battles. Although he was healed, his realm fell back from mid-tier to low-tier 4th level. It just wasn't realistic to assume that by fighting continuously, his realm could rapidly increase while causing him no harm. In fact, his dragon core was injured, and his meridian had wounds that were hard to detect. Irene didn't tell Jacob that it was a level 9 elixir pill. She just glanced at him and said, I need to go to 8th heaven and cultivate. I don't know when I'll come out again. However, if I find that when I finish cultivating, something happened to Kathy, you'd be responsible. Even those sisters can't stop me from hunting you down. When she finished her words, a beam of green light rose into the sky. There were no signs that Irene came to the roof of the profound cultivation palace. Kenith stepped on the corners and climbed back up to the top of the profound cultivation palace. Old witch, I'll defeat you one day. Kenith looked up to the sky and shouted at the beam of green light. He had fallen to the ground and was paralyzed for a moment. He had spent a lot of energy climbing back up the rooftop, but Irene had left. Jacob, who was standing next to Kenith, was sweating profusely. He thought, Uncle is extremely brave to cuss at a soul formation realm cultivator. Suddenly, a beam of green light flew towards the profound cultivation palace. Kenith used his hands to block it, but he was hit by it again and pushed backwards. He landed on a team of patrolling soldiers, and 5 to 6 poor soldiers who were wearing armor were knocked to the ground. When the soldiers saw it was Kenith, they quickly lifted him. Kenith was in a bad mood and kept cursing. Jacob stood on the roof of the profound cultivation palace. He turned around and looked at the fading green light and thought, Irene isn't a very tolerant person. After such a commotion, dawn arrived. A white beam of light was approaching the main gate of the North Atlantic Dragon Palace. "Who is it?" a soldier protecting the main gate said in a loud voice. "Susan, from the Dragon God Shrine." Susan said her name and rushed into the North Atlantic Dragon Palace. Draken was in the palace reading documents. "Dragon King, Susan from the Dragon God Shrine wants to see you," a guard shouted from outside. Draken stopped working and looked up as he asked, "Where are the prince and Kenith?" "They were drinking at the rooftop of the profound cultivation palace last night, and they're now at the practice field, watching the soldiers' morning training," the guard responded. "They're getting pretty close now," Draken said to himself. Then he said loudly, "Take Susan to the visitors' palace, then get General Arthur, Elder Liam, Elder Frank, and Elder Kayla over here." "As you wish," the guard quickly left. Moments later, many were gathering at the visitors' palace. Sophie was still half asleep, was dragged over by Helen. Kathy, Jade, and Julia were also brought over. Susan stood there quietly. She was waiting for Jacob. Half a minute later, Jacob and Kenith both arrived at the visitors' palace. Susan finally moved. "Susan, are you looking for me?" he asked. "Yeah," Susan nodded lightly. She threw a token at Jacob and said, "This is the token for inspectors of the Dragon God Shrine. Because you showed exceptional performance during the exams, they promoted you to a level 3 inspector." Jacob caught the heavy token and felt his forehead burn a bit. A 3 dark golden flame symbol lit up and then disappeared on Jacob's forehead. This meant that Jacob was no longer an assisting inspector, but an official inspector now. Jacob held the token and sensed the auras in the palace more clearly. He could tell the realm of each person from their lights and strong auras. For instance, General Arthur was top tier 6th level, while Elder Liam and Elder Frank were low tier 7th level. It looked like the token of inspectors were also treasures. There are still many other uses for that token. I'll explain them to you in the future. Susan took out a golden box from her bracelet and said, "Here's the core lotus that you mentioned." When Susan said those words, Kenneth's eyes brightened up. Jacob noticed it and knew that Kenith entered the Dragon God Shrine's general exams to get the core lotus while practicing his skills. Not only did Kenith stare at the treasure, but Jade and Julia also got excited. As long as Jacob possessed this treasure, his probability of getting to the peak 8th level increased drastically. He could also pass by the heavenly tribulation easier and increase levels quicker. As long as Jacob had this treasure, he could become a heavenly dragon. Jacob took the golden box from Susan and carefully opened it. Inside the box was a normal gray lotus flower. It was the size of the tip of the pinky finger, and one couldn't sense nature essence from it. In other words, it looked like a withered lotus. It looked much different from what Jacob had imagined. Its plain appearance was also why no inspector took it. "Jade, Julia, come over and look at this for me," Jacob said. "Okay." Jade and Julia went over speedily. They looked down at Jacob's hand and carefully inspected the box before looking up and saying in a cheery tone, "Congratulations, Master. This is the genuine core lotus." "Okay." Jacob closed the box with a satisfied look on his face. Then he turned to Kenith and said, "Uncle, this is for you." "What?" Kenith has seen many things in his life, but he was shocked at this moment. Jade and Julia were also shocked. The core lotus was an extremely rare treasure. They had looked everywhere and only discovered one at the Dragon God Shrine. Jacob's act of gifting the core lotus was equivalent to gifting his own future to Kenith. On this treacherous journey of cultivation, cultivators took every opportunity they got and would even risk their lives to get ahead. Normally, no one would do what Jacob did and gift their chances away. "Uncle?" Jacob called again. Kenith woke up from his shock after hearing Jacob shout. He looked at Jacob and saw the bruises on Jacob's face again. He thought, "I beat him up last night, and he's still giving such a rare treasure to me." "Master!" The twins couldn't just take the core lotus away from Jacob, so they tried to stop him by shouting. "Uncle is the one who has the most hope in charging into the heavenly dragon realm. Giving the core lotus to him is the better decision," Jacob said. "Well, since you put it that way, I'll take it with gratitude." Kenith took the golden box from Jacob. Jade and Julia looked frustrated. They tried so hard to get the core lotus for Jacob, but he just gave it out as a favor. "Why did you make me get this thing for you? What is it really?" Susan asked Jacob. Jacob didn't respond, but the frustrated twins responded before Jacob could. "This is the best suited mystic crystal for Master!" Susan didn't know what this lotus was for, but her eyes opened wide after hearing the twins' explanation. She was shocked as well. Any dragon cultivator was willing to sacrifice everything for an excellent mystic crystal. But Jacob just gifted it away? Other than Susan, Draken, Helen, Elder Liam, Elder Frank, and Elder Kayla all looked at Jacob in surprise. "Uncle, if you can't get to the heavenly dragon realm, you'd be wasting this great treasure," Jacob joked. "I don't need you to tell me." Kenith put the golden box back into his storage ring. Although Kenith didn't say thanks, gratitude was written in his heart. He owed Jacob his life for this. Susan calmed down and looked at Jacob. "There's another thing. The Dragon God Shrine demoted Tom and sent him off to the cold and remote Northwest Territory again. That's why, from now on, you and I will be the inspectors in charge of this region." Hearing such news, not only did Jacob's face light up, but Draken and Helen were also pleased. Due to the different origins and experiences of the inspectors, although they were all inspectors of the Dragon God Shrine, they still had their own preferences. For example, Susan grew up in the North Atlantic Dragon Palace. Therefore, on some issues, she was more lenient towards the North Atlantic Dragon clan. As for Tom, he obviously favored the South Atlantic Dragon clan. His being an inspector in the city certainly would make the North Atlantic Dragon clan somewhat uncomfortable. Now that Jacob had replaced Tom and become the inspector of the city, this was certainly good news for the North Atlantic Dragon clan. A while back, North Atlantic brutally defeated South Atlantic, and Jacob was so outstanding in the Dragon God Shrine's general exams that he even defeated Tom. The North Atlantic Dragon clan was having so much momentum, and the Dragon God Shrine felt that Tom, who couldn't even defeat the North Atlantic's prince, had no chance of holding back the North Atlantic Dragon Palace. So they had to make some adjustments in their strategy. "That's all. I'm going back," Susan said. "Inspector Susan, it's better for us to go together. We also have to head back," Draken said. "Yeah. Let's go together." Sophie held Susan's arm and smiled happily. Sophie looked up to Susan like an elder sister, and she was the only person who Susan showed some warmth. They had not spent any time together ever since Susan took Jacob in as her student, so this would be a good chance for them to hang out a little. "Let's go back." Jacob put away the inspector token and looked around. "Where are Noah and Snowflake?" "The little master is still asleep. I will go call him right away," General Arthur said. "There's no need. I'm already up." Noah appeared at the door of the visitor's palace in his white shirt, and Snowflake was with him. He still had that proud look on his face, as if everyone owed him money.
"Master,"
Jade and Julia moved to Jacob's side. They picked up Jacob's palm and checked the balance of elements in Jacob's body. They asked him in a surprised tone,
"Master, how come you fell half a realm?"
Helen heard this statement and immediately looked at Jacob and worried. However, Jade and Julia continued,
"But your foundation is actually much better than before. The 5 elemental nature essences are perfectly balanced."
Jacob cultivated the Sword Shadow Scroll. The more balanced the 5 elemental nature essences were, the higher his power. During this time, Jacob was exhausted from fighting, and the balance in his body was already thrown off. Now, Jade and Julia found that the 5 elemental nature essence in Jacob's body were like being packed in grids, neatly arranged. How could they imagine that Jacob had just swallowed a level 9 elixir pill? Any kind of level 9 elixir pill had the magical effects of cleansing the flesh and reshaping the bones. Not to mention the fact that Irene gave Jacob a level 9 elixir pill that specialized in repairing the body. If it weren't for Jacob's serious physical injuries, one level 9 elixir pill would have been enough to increase Jacob's realm. Of course, reliance on pills wasn't stable.
"Today is the Dragon Boat Festival, and there should be a boat race. Let's go see it," Kathy softly suggested to the younger group.
"Boat race?" Sophie thought for half a second and raised her head.
"Mom, I want to see the boat race. We'll take Grandma there, too."
"It's been a long time since we met up with Jacob's family."
"All right, we'll go,"
Helen said.
"Yeah!"
Sophie was very excited. She then grabbed Susan's arm again and said,
"Susan, why don't you come and see the boat race, too?"
Susan hesitated. Okay. It was not her style to spend half a day on activities other than cultivation. But thinking of the fact that the Dragon God Shrine's general exams kept her mood anxious for quite a few days, it was all right to relax. Seeing Susan agree, Sophie immediately talked to the others.
"Elder Frank, Elder Liam, and Elder Kayla, let's go."
"I still have the task of rainfall today. I'm afraid I cannot join you," Liam apologized. Elder Frank and Elder Kayla smiled and nodded. Seeing that the princess invited them, they had to be respectful and agree when they could.
"General Arthur, you come too."
Sophie immediately looked to General Arthur. General Arthur moved his gaze to Draken and hesitated. He wanted to go out. When they went to the Dragon God Shrine, he was particularly happy. However, since his duty was to manage the North Atlantic Dragon Palace, he couldn't leave his post without authorization. "Let's go together," Draken said. "Thank you, Dragon King." General Arthur, whose face was filled with the signs of old age, laughed like a child. "When we're outside the palace, don't call me Dragon King," Draken reminded him. "Yes, I understand, Mr. Richards." General Arthur caught himself and changed how he addressed Draken. He went on land very few times, but he often communicated with Elder Liam and Elder Frank. Those 2 elders interacted with the Dragon King on land, so he picked up a few things from them. General Arthur's words and expression caused everyone to laugh. Draken also smiled helplessly. Jacob showed his supreme power in the Dragon God Shrine, but he gave the best mystic crystal to Kenith, making him hopeful of becoming a heavenly dragon. This series of events allowed Draken to sweep away the depression from before and feel happy. The group immediately changed into some land-appropriate clothes and walked to the gate of the Dragon Palace. They took out their own treasures, created energy spheres, and got back on land. After getting back on land, Jacob first gave his grandma a call. "Jacob, you came back?" Grandma's voice sounded on the phone. "Yes, where are you, Grandma?" Jacob asked. "I'm here at the dock with your parents, and we're watching the boat race," Grandma shouted. "Okay, we'll be there soon." Jacob hung up. The dock, Jacob turned to Helen and said, "Let's go." Jacob took out her river mountain painting and opened it. They stepped on the painting, that was more than 10 meters long, and flew to the dock.
The river mountain painting released colorful lights as it flew up the river, gliding in the wind. Wasn't it more majestic than any boat? They arrived at the dock in the blink of an eye. Jacob immediately spotted his parents and Grandma in the crowd. Among the crowd, there were also some dragon cultivators mixed in. However, their realms were not high. They were from river and lake clans, and they were only here to join in on the fun. The river mountain painting landed behind a commercial building near the dock. Then, Helen removed the energy sphere and led the group to the event. First time being in such a lively place, General Arthur seemed excited. He took out a pair of sunglasses and put them on, and he suddenly looked cool. "Grandma!" Jacob saw her and shouted, "Jacob, Jacob!" Grandma turned and saw Jacob. She then waved her hand above her head. "Grandma!" Sophie dashed over and ran into Grandma's arms. "Soph, I missed you so much," Grandma said as she squeezed Soph's face. Jacob was speechless as he thought, "You say this every time, Grandma. Can't you change up the lines?" "Louise!" Helen came over gracefully and greeted. "Helen!" Grandma reached out her arms at Helen in excitement. Helen smiled softly and stepped forward to give Grandma a gentle hug. Grandma was very kind, and Helen had a gentle personality. Therefore, Grandma felt close to her from the bottom of her heart. On top of that, Grandma stayed at Helen's place for a while, so they bonded very well. "Hey, Mila!" Helen smiled at Mila after the hug. Grandma and Helen cared a lot for each other, and Mila and Helen understood each other. When Helen and Mila were making eye contact, Draken and Walter both stepped forward for a handshake. Helen and Mila were two good friends on the same educational level, while Draken and Walter respected each other. The two families got along very well. "Where did you go?" Grandma asked joyfully. We took a trip to the nearby mountain," Helen smiled. "Thank you for taking care of these two," Grandma nodded pleasantly. She didn't worry at all since Jacob and Kathy went on a trip with Helen's family. "What are you talking about? We should thank you for taking care of Soph and Noah," Helen said politely. Okay. Grandma looked behind Helen and asked, "These are?" Let me introduce them," Draken said brightly. "This is my little brother Kenith. This is Mr. Frank from Frank's Martial Arts Academy. This is a good friend of mine. Mr. Arthur, this is our family friend, Miss Kayla, and this is a friend of Soph's, Susan. She teaches at Jacob's University." General Arthur took his sunglasses off and bowed instinctively with a smile on his face when Draken introduced him. Grandma looked at them and smiled kindly. Elder Frank and General Arthur had changed into professional suits now. Elder Kayla looked cold and haughty. Susan, who was standing beside her, appeared to be calm and elegant in comparison. Kenneth froze for a second before revealing an uncomfortable smile. "I haven't met your younger brother before. Did he just arrive in the city? Does he need Walter to refer him to a job?" Grandma continued. Kenneth looked confused. He knew that he looked a little rough around the edges. That didn't mean that he was jobless. "Don't worry about him, Mom. Soph's father knows a lot of people. They won't need us for that," Mila said immediately. "You're right. I'm being overly concerned." Grandma nodded apologetically. Then she looked around and said, "Let's find a nice spot before it's too late." Their city was hosting a boat race with a few nearby cities for this year's Dragon Boat Festival. Many tourists, as well as local residents, came here for the event. Therefore, there were lots of people around. They had to walk to a higher place for a better view. While they walked forward, Grandma got closer to Kenneth and asked, "What school did you go to? Are you still single?" Kenneth rolled his eyes, not knowing what to say. If Draken didn't drag him to see this boring boat race, he wouldn't even talk to mortals. "How old are you?" Grandma continued as Kenneth didn't respond. "Mom!" Mila stopped her immediately. "Seems like it's Draken's brother's first time in the city. I just want to know more about it," Grandma said to Mila. "It's his first time in the city, and he doesn't know much about this city. He seems very shy, so Don't ask him too many questions, Mila said to her patiently. I wouldn't be asking him those questions if he wasn't Draken's younger brother, Grandma complained lightly, but she stopped her interrogation at last. Kenith looked a little defeated after Grandma asked those questions. At this moment, Sophie walked over and said, Uncle? What? Kenith looked at her. Don't hit Jacob in the future, Sophie said to him a little hesitantly. Kenith was stupefied. He was feeling wronged and sad at the same time. Me hitting Jacob? I was hit by someone else. That old wicked cultivator only flipped her finger and almost broke my bones, he thought. After saying that, Sophie murmured something lightly before speeding up to catch up with Jacob. Kenith looked at Sophie's leaving figure, feeling lost. My little Soph is starting to take other people's side, he thought. When he was sighing lightly, a figure walked closer to him. Kenith turned over and saw Elder Kayla's charming face. Are you leaving this time? Elder Kayla asked. Jacob and the others kept walking to a better viewing spot. The police force of the city was heavily situated there. They made sure no resident was crossing the fence. So many people, Sophie sighed. Noah, come here. Grandma saw Noah walking through the crowd and waved at him. Noah walked over with Snowflake in his arms, and Grandma put her arms around him immediately to protect him. Noah was moved by her caring act. His master, Thomas, was the most powerful array master and elixir master in the world, and he never cared for him as much as Grandma did. Grandma was already old, but she protected Noah in her arms in such a crowd. She didn't want him to get pushed down by the surrounding adults. Helen and the others squeezed over at last. They didn't expect to see so many people at the boat race. General Arthur even lost his sunglasses on the way here. He had been the premier of the Dragon Palace for hundreds of years, and this was his first time looking this messy. Where is Kenith? Helen looked into the crowd. Kayla isn't here either, Draken said. Is there anything wrong? Elder Frank was a little worried, but he was short in size and couldn't see far without flying. Draken was a little worried too, and he started to look around and search for them. Don't worry about it, Helen suddenly laughed happily. She patted Draken's shoulder and pointed in a direction. Draken looked in the direction that she was pointing at, and he saw Kenith in his black shirt and Elder Kayla in her white dress standing near the fence. As they looked ahead, they chatted and ate ice cream. It seemed like Kenith hadn't had ice cream before. There was ice cream on his nose. The way he held the cone in his right hand looked very weird. It seemed like he was holding a weapon instead of an ice cream cone. Ha, I see, Draken smiled. Let them be. General Arthur was somewhat excited. Elder Kayla and Third Lord? At last. Don't gossip, Draken stopped him. Okay, Mr. Richards. General Arthur immediately closed his mouth. Elder Frank laughed as he patted General Arthur's back. General Arthur rarely came on land, and it was his first time at a mortal group event. He was obviously overly excited. There's so many people. Let's just watch here, Grandma shouted towards Helen and the others as they walked over. Looks like this is the only way, Helen smiled lightly. Susan followed them quietly. Since she didn't like crowds, she almost wanted to go home. Dr. Brown! Someone called out from above when they headed towards the fence. They looked up and saw the mayor standing on top of a platform. It was normally used for sentry duties, and that space wasn't too big. However, it was still enough for a dozen people. Come up, Dr. Brown! Oh, Mr. Richards is also here, the mayor shouted. Walter didn't want to stand together with the politicians. However, his mother was old, and it was too crowded for her down here. So he walked up the stairs while holding her, and the police officers let them through. Please stay here, General Arthur and Elder Frank. Soph, Helen, come with me, Draken said. Draken had connections in the city, so the mayor had to show respect as well. Noah didn't want to go up, but he suddenly saw a little figure on the platform. Therefore, he immediately picked up Snowflake and headed onto the platform. Come up with us, Susan, Sophie said to Susan when he saw her not moving. Susan hesitated for a second before she walked upstairs. It was unrealistic to create an energy sphere when she was this close to a crowd. Therefore, it was a good idea to get on the platform to stay away from the crowd. I didn't think that I would run into you here, Dr. Brown. The mayor shook Walter's hand in excitement. Jacob took the opportunity to look at the people up there on the platform. There were several people here. His college rival Michael and his father, the deputy mayor, the famous painter Tom, the CEO of the Conqueror Group, Hank, his grandson Henry, the mayor's daughter Anna. It seemed like Jacob had quite a few acquaintances here. 4 people in Jacob's family, 3 people in Sophie's family, the twins, Kathy, Susan, Noah, and Snowflake standing on the platform. The spacious place became a bit crowded. Michael, who came here with his father, widened his eyes, surprised at the sight of Susan, who had never attended public events. More astonishing than seeing her in this crowded environment was that she stepped onto the platform with Jacob and his parents. In college, the rumor had it that Susan was Jacob's distant cousin. However, it had never been confirmed. Intense jealousy burned in Michael. He didn't know that it was the first time Jacob's parents met Susan, and Jacob and Susan's relationship was indeed close, since they were both level 3 inspectors who were in charge of this region. Standing at one corner of the platform, Mayor William found the place crowded as well, since he didn't expect that Walter and Draken would bring up so many people. Not wanting to ask the kids to get off, he turned to look at the deputy mayor, and, understanding the mayor's intention, the deputy mayor immediately said, "Michael, didn't you say that you wanted to watch from the fence? Let's go and watch from there." Before he could utter any objections, Michael was dragged to the stairs by his father. Today he came to watch the boat race with his father, the deputy mayor. He was smug about the best view and the privilege he enjoyed, until Jacob and the others came over and squeezed him out. However, it couldn't be helped. After all, the city could have another deputy mayor to manage the economy, but there was only one Walter and one Mila, the power couple of the scientific world. Walter and Mila had drawn the high-tech businesses to the region, which covered this and the surrounding cities to form a large-scale high-tech industry chain. Not only did the government science research funds come here, but some big world-famous companies had expressed their willingness to invest in their region. The economic benefits and brand Walter and Mila brought far surpassed the deputy mayor who managed the local economy. "Mayor William, I'll go and check on the situation on the other side. A journalist from the Morning News is asking for me. I have a meeting in the Land Bureau. I'll go earlier." The other officials who were responsible for transportation, culture, and planning all found excuses to leave. Mayor William laughed crisply and said, "Let me introduce you to each other. This is Mr. Tom Lester, a famous painter. This is Mr. Hank, chairman of Conqueror Group, and this is Mr. Hank's grandson." He turned slightly and introduced people on Jacob's side. "They are all well known, Dr. Walter and Dr. Mila Brown. This is Mr. Draken Richards, chairman of MTX Group, and this is his wife, Miss Helen, a famous architect. You may know each other already." "Hello, pleasure to meet you." They greeted each other politely. Jacob looked at Hank cautiously, afraid of any unexpected moves from him. Henry looked at Jacob with resentment, but remained obediently by Hank's side. A few days ago, Jacob couldn't observe him comprehensively in the Dragon God Shrine. Now, with the inspector's token on him, Jacob could see that Henry emitted vague lights and was at the 2nd level. He remembered that Henry's cultivation strength was ruined, and he guessed that Henry restarted his cultivation after Hank traded treasure for him with the Dragon God Shrine. The Dragon God Shrine was indeed resourceful, since it could help a cultivator who got his foundation ruined to get back on the path of cultivation. Now that Jacob had reached the 4th level, he didn't have to worry about Henry. who was only at the second level. Grandmaster Hank had acquired a second chance for Henry to cultivate, since he wanted his grandson to inherit the South Atlantic Dragon Palace. Mr. Hank plans to invest in a huge car manufacturing base in our city. We were in the middle of discussing this, Mayor Williams said with a smile. Oh, auto manufacturing base. Draken looked interested. Although Draken was the Dragon King of the North Atlantic, he was also an intelligent business tycoon on land. With a glance at the situation, he knew that Tom had arranged this informal meeting between the mayor and Hank. Yeah, Mr. Hank plans to invest $50 million to build a modern auto manufacturing base in our city. Jacob immediately felt engaged. After all, it was a very sensitive topic since Hank planned to build a big auto manufacturing base in the main city of the North Atlantic region. Although the dragon cultivators couldn't interfere with mortal lives, they could do business in disguise of mortal identities. By planning to build an auto manufacturing base in this city, close to the North Atlantic Dragon Palace, Hank was walking a fine line on the rules. If the mayor approved his plan, then the North Atlantic Dragon Palace could only force the auto manufacturing base out with business methods instead of destroying it by force. Mr. Richards, are you interested in this project? Mayor Williams asked Draken. The mayor had heard about the recent conflict between the MTX Group and the Conqueror Group. But in the world of business, profit always took priority, and no one would be enemies with each other forever if benefits were involved, especially between these two former partners. That was why Mayor William thought that MTX Group, another capital tycoon, might be interested in joining the venture. If the auto manufacturing base doubled its size, it would be a big investment, creating an automobile industry with its center in the North Atlantic region and branches all over the country. This industry would certainly push up the city's economy, which would be a great political achievement for him. I think it would be better if the city doesn't build such a plan, Draken said calmly. Oh? Mayor William was surprised at Draken's answer. With beautiful sceneries of the beaches and the ocean, ours is a city of leisure and tourism instead of a city that features heavy industries. It'd be a big mistake if we introduced an auto manufacturing base into the city, Draken said. His tone was calm, but his words were blunt, showing no consideration for Hank. After all, as the biggest taxpayer, largest conglomerate in the city, MTX Group was the leader in the local business circle. The mayor of the city would change every several years, but Draken, as the business leader of the region, would stay. Mayor William wanted to draw in the investment of the Conqueror Group, but he didn't want to offend the MTX Group. After all, MTX Group far surpassed Conqueror Group, no matter reputation or capital. What do you think, Dr. Brown? Mayor William turned to ask Walter. Despite his low profile, Walter was a powerful figure in the city, and even the whole country. By asking his advice, Mayor William was finding a way out for himself. I agree with Mr. Richards. Our focus is not on heavy industries. In fact, MTX Group has its own heavy machinery factories, but they're all situated in other places around the country instead of being close to the city, Walter said in a clear voice. Not expecting Walter to be so blunt in his opinion as well, Mayor William tried again and turned to Mila and asked, well, what do you think, Dr. Brown? Mayor William, $50 million is a big investment, but the living environment of all the residents is an intangible asset. Our city has been a great tourist attraction for our clean and calm environment, and a factory here would definitely hamper that. We also have the best scientific facilities in the country as of now. We can't have everything in the city development. We must have our own goals and unique features, Mila said in a clear and steady voice. After hearing Mila's words, Mayor William didn't have any more doubts. He smiled at Hank apologetically and said, Sorry, Mr. Hank, but I have to agree with Dr. Mila. We can't have everything in the development of the city. Our city specializes in tourism and research, and you can invest in the new scientific research projects if you're interested. Or you can contribute to the education sector of our city like Mr. Richards. Displeasure flashed across Hank's face, but he controlled himself. After all, this city was Draken's territory. If Hank couldn't build his own base here, it'd be of no use investing in other projects in the city. Hank had dominated over the South Atlantic for the last hundreds of years, but now his plan was obstructed by some reckless mortals. Helen turned to look at Walter and Mila with gratitude. With their status being higher than the mayor's, the opinions of Walter and Mila were very important. Although they talked from the perspective of the future development of the city, they also supported Draken. Since MTX Group and Conqueror Group had fought fiercely not long ago in the business world, MTX Group wouldn't allow its rival to enter their territory. It sounds pretty nice that the city plans to develop the high-tech science labs, one of the scientists who came with Hank said. Recently, Dr. Brown started the project called Dragons, right? Hearing his words, his companions all had weird looks on their faces, with a trace of mockery. However, none of them dared to be obvious about it. When Walter, the world-famous biologist, declared that he planned to search for dragons, it immediately became a hot topic in the media, especially when he decided to lead the project personally. Those underachieved and lazy scientists who had been in the science circle for years all pointed fingers and waited to see Walter's public humiliation. After all, dragons only existed in the legends, and Walter was destroying his own reputation by establishing this project. Even some senior members of the science circle called him trying to talk him out of such a silly project, which attracted public attention and would harm his career. However, Walter worked through the pressure and established the project with his own funds. To show respect to him, the government granted some symbolic funds to the project and put it under the category of marine life. At this moment, this scientist brought it up to mock Walter. Walter looked at this scientist coldly, knowing why he held such a grudge against him. In fact, the scientists who came on the tour in the city with Conqueror Group were experts in auto engineering. Now that the 50 million project was gone to thin air, the future they had expected was gone as well. Although Walter welcomed criticism and suggestions, he was displeased that his biology project was mocked by someone who specialized in auto mechanics. Walter ignored them. Sensing his displeasure, Mila tried to placate him with a whisper. With their status and reputation, Walter and Mila didn't have to waste their energy on arguments with these insignificant scientists. If they did, they would only end up helping these guys gain publicity. After all, some scientists didn't work hard to make achievements in their fields, but focused on attracting attention through fraud and bluffing. Dr. Milo, do you also think that finding dragons is high-tech? Receiving no response from Walter, they continued to pressure and ask. Although Mila wasn't too keen on dragons, she supported her husband, who persisted in this project. In my opinion, Dr. Walter, the so-called new star in the International Science Circle, are overrated. The project about the mythical creatures is just a trick to get funds. And you guys are just frauds, one of them said. At this, fury rose in Mila. She could ignore another gossip, but she wouldn't stand by and allow them to defame Walter's reputation. She knew more than anyone else about how hard Walter had worked. For his beloved science research projects, he had been away from home for months and had immersed himself in the lab. It was his honest and rigorous work ethic that allowed him to make significant scientific discoveries, one after another. To focus his attention on research, he even declined many international awards, which showed his disregard for fame. But now, these guys branded him as a fraud? How dare you insult my son like this? Mila was about to retort when Jacob's grandma picked up her walking cane and hit the scientist who badmouthed Walter. Before they accompanied Grandma to watch the boat race, Walter and Mila were worried about her lack of physical strength and got her a walking cane. Hearing her son being insulted by some strangers, Grandma was furious and hit them with her cane. The scientist tried to dodge in a hurry. Although Grandma wasn't strong, it was still painful to be stabbed by the hard walking cane. I'll break your legs for saying such nonsense about my son. How dare you say that my son is a fraud and a liar? Grandma got even more furious and began to swing the walking cane with both hands. Startled by the fierceness of this old lady, the scientist almost fell over the fence in the process of dodging. The brawny Hank suddenly caught Grandma's walking cane with one hand. Grandma tried to retrieve it from his grip with both hands, but couldn't move it even by an inch. Mayor William, I brought them here, and this woman is just hitting them like this? Hank asked. The moment he said this, Jacob took 2 steps forward and placed one hand on Grandma's walking cane. Grandma! Sophie steadied Grandma on either side of her. In a bad mood, Hank tightened the grip of his right hand. Afraid that Hank would hurt Grandma, Jacob took the walking cane from Grandma and tightened his grip as well. The wooden cane instantly broke in two. Looking at Jacob and Hank, the mayor was astonished at their great force and wondered about the poor quality of the walking cane. Jacob, beat them! Toss these jerks into the water and feed them to the Dragon King, Grandma said angrily after Jade and Julia walked her to the back. Hearing her words, both Draken and Hank's face froze, and they thought, we don't eat such things. Mayor William, I don't think it's right to hit people like this. Tom walked forward and said as light beams gathered in his palm. Although ordinary dragon cultivators couldn't attack mortals, inspectors were not restricted by this rule. Mr. Lester, how do you feel about their insults? Suddenly, Susan walked forward with a streak of green light in her palm as well. They were just arguing. It's not right to hit them. At the sight of Susan, Tom softened his tone. From what he knew about Susan, he thought that she wouldn't get involved in such things. To his surprise, she took the matter into her own hands. Mr. Lester, I recall hearing that you were planning to put up an exhibition in New York. Why are you still here then? Susan asked lightly. Tom couldn't say anything. Susan released her invisible aura and suppressed Tom. After all, the Dragon God Shrine had relocated him to the bitter cold place in the northwest, so he shouldn't continue to stay here. Mr. Hank, you're here to visit the city, so you are our guest. As a guest, you must abide by the rules and not mess with the hosts, Susan said to Hank, calmly. Although Hank was the Dragon King of South Atlantic, he couldn't say anything to Susan. After all, she was the regional inspector and a mid-tier, 8th-level cultivator. He was on their territory, and the South Atlantic Dragon Clan's strength had been greatly damaged, and thus had no power to challenge the Dragon God Shrine. With a livid face, he turned toward the scientist beside him and said, Hurry up and apologize to Dr. Brown. These scientists were employees of the Research Center of Conqueror Group and received paychecks from them. After looking at each other, they immediately lowered their heads and said, Dr. Brown, we were just joking. Please don't take our words seriously. We apologize to you. Walter and Mila didn't spare a glance at them, thinking, these spineless people don't deserve to be scientists. After forcing Tom back, Susan snorted and went back to Mila's side. Grandma's angry face also turned into a satisfied smile. Okay, the boat race is beginning. Let's watch. Mayor William tried to smooth things over and said, pointing to the distance. Dropping the broken walking cane in his hand, Jacob returned to his grandma's side. Ever since he saw Hank, Jacob had been on guard. After all, mortals were fragile in front of cultivators, and he would battle Hank if the latter tried to mess with his family. The 7 boats had set off from a distance. They would cross by the place where they were standing and finally reach the other end. The red boat in the middle was the boat team of their city, while the other 6 were rivals from nearby cities. The drums began to beat on the sides, while cheers resonated all around. Each boat had 10 people in them, and their uniformed rowing pushed the boats through the waves at great speed. Standing by Grandma's side, Jacob turned his head to look for Noah, and realized that the kid had slipped to Anna's side without anyone noticing. Noah was saying something to her, while the latter seemed to be paying him little attention. Dr. Brown, how about we make a bet on who will be the winner? Mayor William asked Walter to change the atmosphere. Okay, Walter agreed with pleasure while he looked at the 7 boats in the distance. I bet on the black boat to the extreme left. How about Mr. Hank? Mayor William turned his head and asked. Hank snorted and didn't answer, not caring to show any respect to a mayor who could do nothing to him. Displeased, Mayor William turned his head towards Draken and asked, what about you, Mr. Richards? I bet on the blue boat, Draken said. I'll make a bet as well, then. I think the green boat will win, Grandma said in high spirits. Then I'll bet on the red one from our city, Mayor William said. What's the wager, then? Hila asked with a smile. How about $100? Mayor William suggested. Draken and the others all nodded. At this moment, Sophie suddenly bumped Kathy with her arm and looked at her with a smug look. We should make a bet as well, she said. What's the wager? Kathy looked at her calmly. Sophie thought for a moment and answered, Since they're doing $100, how about we do $50? Kathy thought about it and answered, I bet on the yellow. I bet on the purple, Sophie immediately responded. The two stared at each other firmly and shook hands. I bet on the white, Susan suddenly said.